When I was 11, my mother taped a $20 bill to our refrigerator, pressed a kiss into the air an inch from my cheek, and boarded a plane to Europe for 4 weeks. She left behind a stack of frozen dinners, a chore list written in her looping cursive, and a promise that a neighbor would check on me, a neighbor who, as it turned out, had no idea she'd been signed up for the job. 28 days later, my mother rolled her suitcase up our front walk, tanned and glowing, arms full of duty-free perfume, and found a padlocked door, a county notice taped across the seam, and a house that had been emptied of her daughter. She dropped everything on the porch and screamed loud enough for 3 houses to hear her. That scream wasn't where the story ended, though. What happened next, in a courtroom 4 months later, is something none of us saw coming, least of all her. Welcome back to Quiet Reckonings, where the family stories nobody wants to tell finally get told, and the people everybody overlooked get the last word. Before we start, tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from tonight, and if a story like this one hits close to home, subscribe, because you will not want to miss where this one goes. Cedarville, Indiana. Population just under 4,000. 1 blinking traffic light, 1 brick library, and a narrow 2-story house on Larkspur Avenue with siding the color of dishwater. That house was ours, and at 11 years old, I ran it the way other kids ran a paper route, methodically, and mostly alone. I woke myself up every morning with a wind-up alarm clock I'd bought for 50 cents at a rummage sale. I had the coffee started before my mother's feet ever hit the hallway floor, because I'd learned that our mornings went smoother if the kitchen already smelled like something was under control. I knew which bill sat under which magnet on the fridge, and I knew their due dates better than I knew my multiplication tables. Water bill by the 2nd. Gas by the 9th. My father, Daniel Ellison, had died of a heart attack when I was 7. Somewhere between his funeral and the start of 2nd grade, without anyone ever announcing it, I got promoted. Nobody handed me the job. I simply became the extra adult in the house. My mother, Diane, was 35, and she had the kind of prettiness that made grocery clerks lose their place mid-sentence. She had a laugh she spent generously on other people, and a sentence she saved just for me. She'd catch me folding towels, or filling out my own permission slips, or reminding her that parent-teacher night was Thursday, and she'd tilt her head like she'd stumbled across a coupon in an old coat pocket. "You're such an easy kid," she'd say. I collected that line, the way other girls collected charm bracelets, proof I was doing something right. Here's something I've never told anyone on camera before. By the time I was in 4th grade, I could reproduce my mother's signature almost perfectly. I never once used it for anything. I just practiced it in pencil in the margins of my math homework, because some part of me already understood that in our house, being useful and being loved had quietly become the same transaction. There was one subject that never came up in our house, though my father's family. Nobody spoke of them. I didn't understand why yet. By that fall, Vince Larkin had been my stepfather for a little over a year. He sold things for a living, vending routes one season, discount supplements the next, and for one memorable stretch, our garage was stacked with imported espresso machines that never worked past their 2nd use. He called himself an entrepreneur. He wore a gold watch he glanced at whenever anyone else was talking. My mother loved him the way people love a scratch-off ticket, with total, renewable optimism. And that September, he came home waving what looked to her like the jackpot, a month in Europe. Paris first, then Rome, then a stretch of coastline he pronounced a different way every time he mentioned it. Business, he said. Meeting suppliers. They'd fold their long-overdue honeymoon in around the meetings. My mother lit up like someone had finally screwed in a working bulb. For 2 straight weeks our house filled with tissue paper, new sandals, and the phrase travel wardrobe, said with real reverence. She hummed while she packed. She hadn't hummed since before my father died. I sat on the staircase one night, watching her fold a sundress into a suitcase like she was tucking in a newborn, and I asked the smallest version of the question I could manage. "Can I come?" She didn't even glance up. "This is grown-up time, sweetheart. Plane tickets aren't cheap." Then she smiled down at the dress, and that was the end of the conversation. I want to be fair because fairness matters to me even now. It didn't feel cruel in the moment. It felt like weather, You don't argue with a forecast, you just find a coat. So I did what I always did. I started planning school schedule, dinners, which lights I could leave off to save money. At the table that last week, Vince leaned back in his chair and told my mother not to worry about a single bill while they were gone. "I've got it handled," he said, and his smile sat a little crooked, like a picture frame somebody had bumped on their way down the hall. They left on a Sunday morning at 10:15. I know the exact time because I stood at the front window and watched the mantel clock while the taxi idled at the curb. The whole thing had the feeling of a launch countdown. My mother walked me through the kitchen one final time, heels clicking, perfume trailing behind her like a bridal veil. 5 casseroles stacked in the freezer, each one labeled Week 1, Week 2, as if 5 dinners could stretch cleanly across 28 days without a remainder. A note on the counter: "Water the plants, bring in the mail, lock both locks." Then she peeled a folded $20 bill and pinned it under a magnet shaped like a little rooster, right at my eye level. "For emergencies," she said breezily, "the way you'd mention a chance of rain. Mrs. Callahan next door will keep an eye on you." Vince honked from the driveway. My mother crouched down, pressed her lips near my cheek without quite touching it, and held me at arm's length like she was checking her reflection. "You're such an easy kid," she said. And then, the door, the gravel under the tires, the taxi's brake lights flashing red at the corner. I stood at the window and counted to 100, because I'd decided if she looked back before I finished counting, it would mean something. She never turned around. Not at 50, not at 90. The taxi swung onto the highway, and the street went quiet in a way I can still hear if I sit still long enough. I was 11 years old, alone in a house with 2 locked doors and $20 guarded by a ceramic rooster. And the very first thing I did, I promise this is true, was wash out her coffee mug. Chore 1. 27 days left. By Monday night I'd already built a system, because of course I had. I drew 28 boxes across 2 pages of my math notebook and assigned a dinner to each one. 5 casseroles didn't come close to covering that, even ration thin, so I penciled in the gaps. Cereal, toast, peanut butter straight from the jar. I made rules the way other kids built blanket forts. Lights off by 9 to keep the electric bill reasonable. School breakfast every single morning, because 35 cents was the best deal in Cedarville. Homework at the kitchen table before it got dark outside. Teeth brushed by flashlight afterward, because a flashlight made alone feel more like camping. Tuesday evening, I took the spare key and walked next door to check in with Mrs. Callahan, mostly so one living adult on the planet would know for certain I existed. I knocked. Nothing. The porch light wasn't just off, it was off in the way a light gets when nobody's needed it for a while. Her car was gone from the carport, and 3 newspapers sat curling under the hedge. I did some arithmetic I didn't want to do. Papers pile up at 1 a day. There were a lot more than 3 under there. I learned later, from the caseworker's report, that Mrs. Callahan had left for her son's place in Florida 2 full weeks before my mother's taxi ever pulled away from the curb. Nobody had actually asked her to watch me. My mother had simply liked the sound of the sentence on her way out the door. I walked back across the grass, locked both locks behind me, and stood in the hallway listening to the refrigerator hum. It was the only other voice in the house. That was the night I understood the real shape of that month. Not one single adult in the world knew I was on my own. $20 sounds like a fortune when you're 11. It stopped sounding like one at the Cedarville grocery, standing over a hand basket with a stub of pencil. Milk 99 cents. Bread 79. Eggs $1.15. Peanut butter, the store brand with the lid that never sat flush, $1.69. I did the subtraction right there in the aisle so there'd never be a moment where a cashier had to lift something back out of my basket. Pride, it turns out, has a budget too. I logged every purchase in the back of my notebook, right next to my practice signatures, because numbers held still when I looked at them, and that month, almost nothing else did. I called my mother's cell exactly once during that first week. It rang strange, 2 long foreign tones, then dropped into a voicemail greeting in a language I didn't recognize. I hung up without leaving a message. She'd warned me before she left that overseas calls cost a small fortune, and fortune was a word I was taking very seriously, standing in a kitchen where the 20 had already shrunk to 1548. Thursday brought the first postcard, the Eiffel Tower lit gold against a gray evening sky. On the back, in her loopy hand, having the time of our lives. Kisses, then my name spelled wrong, 2 N's where there should have been 1. I stood at the mailbox reading my own name misspelled by the woman who'd chosen it. Then I did what I did with everything that month. I filed it. I pinned it to the fridge under the rooster magnet, right beside the 20. Decoration and emergency fund, side by side. The plants got watered, the mail came in. The boxes in my notebook got checked off, one meal at a time. School was the easy part, which tells you something about everything else. I'd always been the kind of student teachers didn't have to think twice about homework in on time, hand up at exactly the right moments, never quite brilliant enough or troublesome enough to earn a second look. That month, I turned invisibility into a craft. Picture day fell in the second week. The envelope wanted $12 I didn't have to spare. I told Mrs. Doyle my mom had forgot to sign the form, rolled my eyes a little for effect. Mom's right. She laughed and moved down the row. The permission slip for the Science Museum trip needed a parent's signature by Friday. I could have written one, I'd turned that signature into a small art form by then, but something in me wouldn't move my hand that direction. So instead I brought the slip home, and let it sit on the counter like it was waiting for her too. Told the teacher we'd turn it in the following week. Kept my ponytail neater than usual. Kept my lunch balance fed with quarters skimmed carefully from the emergency 20, a little at a time, so the number on the cafeteria screen never flashed red. Being flawless, I discovered, is the best hiding place there is. Nobody double-checks a straight-A girl with a tidy braid. But twice that week I felt it, Mrs. Doyle's eyes lingering on me half a second longer than usual, the way you look at a picture hung just slightly crooked. Once she asked, quietly, "Everything okay at home, hun?" And I gave her the smile I'd been rehearsing since I was 7. "Yes, ma'am, Mom's just busy." She nodded and turned back to the whiteboard, and I sat there with my heart going like a rabbit's, terrified she'd ask again, and hoping, somewhere underneath that she would. The envelope was already sitting in our mailbox by day 6, though I didn't understand what it meant until day 9. Red band across the top. Final disconnection notice. I knew our bills the way I knew my spelling list, and this one said the electric account hadn't been paid in 2 months. August and September, both gone before the taxi had ever left the driveway. Vince had handled the bills exactly the way he'd handled the espresso machines. I counted what remained of the 20 spread across the kitchen table. $13 and change, against a past-due balance of $138. There are problems an 11-year-old can solve with a pencil, and there are problems that simply arrive. On the 9th of October, at 6 in the evening, the refrigerator stopped humming in the middle of a note. The kitchen light died over my homework. The house went so quiet I could hear the living room clock, and then I couldn't hear anything except my own breathing. Because at 11, the dark inside your own house is a different species of dark than any other kind. I wanted on the record that I did not panic. I found the flashlight, put on 2 sweaters, moved the milk out to the back porch, where October could do the refrigerator's job for free. The answering machine by the couch went dark with everything else, one small red light blinking out, and I remember thinking, good, one less thing running up the bill. I had absolutely no idea what that dead little machine was about to cost me. People ask me now why I never told anyone. Here's the truth about being 11, you don't learn to protect yourself first. You learn to protect the family. You keep the secret so the walls stay standing. If you've ever done that, gone quiet so nothing would come crashing down, tell me in the comments. I read every one. And subscribe, because what that last $5 had to cover next, you're going to want to hear. The casseroles spoiled all at once, the Tuesday after the power died. Everything the freezer had been guarding surrendered together, and I carried it out to the trash can in 3 separate trips, holding my breath, apologizing to no one in particular. Week 3, gone. Week 4, gone. I redrew the boxes in my notebook again. Breakfast became the meal I could count on. 35 cents at school bought a tray and a carton of milk, and if you offered to wipe down tables for the lunch lady afterward, Sometimes a second carton found its way to you without anybody calling it charity out loud. Lunch ran on the dwindling quarters. Dinner was peanut butter, measured out by the spoonful. I got good at timing hunger, the way it crests, then loses interest if you simply refuse to look at it. $9.50 left. After school, I stopped going straight home, because home was cold and dark and 48 degrees. Instead, I walked to the Cedarville Public Library, which was warm and bright and smelled like paper and floor polish, and I stayed until Ms. Nan Ostrander flicked the lobby lights at 8 to close up. I did my homework at the corner table by the radiator. I worked my way through half the dog books in the children's section. And Ms. Ostrander, mid-40s, cardigan, reading glasses on a beaded chain, began noticing things I thought I was hiding well. She never once asked me a direct question. She just started leaving a granola bar on the returns cart near my table, announcing to the empty room, "Leftovers from the reading program, somebody help me clear these before they go stale." I helped her clear them every single night. Two people can carry a secret together without ever saying it out loud, and that October Ms. Ostrander and I carried mine. She was the first adult who actually saw me. She would not be the last. The cold worked its way into my bones by the third week. The water heater ran on electricity, which meant a hot shower now cost more than we had, and Indiana in October does not negotiate. I washed my hair under water that made my skull ache, and told myself pioneer kids had survived worse. Around day 17, my left ear began to throb, a deep, underwater kind of ache, like a thumb pressing in from inside my skull. I found a bottle of children's pain reliever in the medicine cabinet, 2 years past its date, and measured out the dose printed for kids under 12, because the label was the only adult left in the house, and I'd been raised to follow instructions. School turned into a balancing act. Staying home wasn't an option, and absence meant the office calling the house, and the house had a dead answering machine. So I went. I sat through class with my ear roaring like a seashell held too close, multiplied fractions, raised my hand at exactly the right speed. At night I slept on the couch under my father's old canvas work coat, laid over the blankets like a second roof. It still smelled faintly of engine grease and cedar. I'd lie there under that smell with my ear pounding in time with my pulse, running the numbers. $4.75. 14 days left. If she came home on schedule, I could make 14 days. I'd already survived 17, and nobody knew, which in my 11-year-old accounting meant nobody was in trouble, which meant the family was safe, which meant I was winning. Day 19 is when the first crack finally showed, and it didn't come for me directly. It came through the front office of Cedarville Elementary on a Thursday morning as a phone call. Not to me. About me. My lunch account had finally scraped bottom despite the quarters, and the cafeteria system did exactly what systems are built to do. It flagged, and the office dialed the home number on file. The call rang into a dead answering machine in a dark living room, and nobody was any the wiser. So they dialed again on Friday. Then they mailed a letter, which I carried in from the mailbox myself, and set on the counter beside the still unsigned permission slip. The two of them sat there together like unexploded ordnance. Monday, Mrs. Doyle caught me at the coat hooks, her voice low. "We've been trying to reach your mom, hun. Everything all right at home?" I looked her dead in the eye, 11 years old, ear screaming, $4 folded into my mitten, and gave the finest performance of my young life. "Yes, ma'am, Mom's just busy. She works a lot." She studied me a beat too long, then nodded, and I walked to my desk on legs that felt made of chalk. That same afternoon, the second postcard arrived. Rome this time, the Colosseum glowing orange in the evening light, postmarked 3 days earlier. On the back, her looping hand, cheerful as a parade, extending 2 more weeks. "Rome is magic, be good, kisses." I stood at the mailbox and read it twice, because the first time the words wouldn't land. 2 more weeks. The 28 boxes in my notebook were already a graveyard, and she just added 14 fresh plots from a cafe table somewhere between magic and kisses. I remember exactly what I did next. I walked inside, pinned Rome next to Paris under the rooster magnet, sat down at the kitchen table still in my coat, and sharpened my pencil. The math had stopped working days ago. I sharpened it anyway. The coldest night of that month, I dragged the couch cushions and every blanket in the house into the hall closet and built myself a nest, because it was the smallest room, and the smallest room held heat the longest. My father's canvas coat went on top like a final layer of roof. $4.75 stayed folded inside my left mitten, which I wore to bed, because losing that money had started showing up in my dreams. The fever arrived Way dusk arrives, you can never point to the exact minute, only notice that the light is gone. I woke before my alarm, aching in every joint, my ear screaming, and got up anyway. Brushed my teeth by flashlight, braided my hair by feel. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror holding the flashlight under my chin like a campfire ghost story and said it out loud to my own gray face, such an easy kid. It had always been my mother's compliment. That morning, it sounded like the fine print at the bottom of a warranty, the terms you agree to just by existing quietly. I put on both sweaters, my coat, and walked to school through frost, breathing carefully around the pain, doing exactly what I'd done for 23 straight days, showing up, checking the box, causing absolutely no trouble. The trick to carrying something too heavy is never setting it down, because some part of you already knows you won't be able to lift it again. I made it through the front doors, through homeroom, into third period. Third period was gym volleyball of all the ordinary things in the world. I remember sneakers squeaking on varnish, the smell of rubber and dust, and then the floor doing a slow, polite quarter turn beneath my feet like a dance partner. The ceiling lights smeared into long streaks. A voice stretched out somewhere far away, calling my name, and the gym floor rose to meet me, warm as bathwater. What I know about the next hour, I know secondhand. The school nurse, Mrs. Callahan, no relation to the missing neighbor, small towns repeat their names, pressed a thermometer to my good ear and read 103.1. My other ear had begun to weep, which is what an eardrum does when it finally gives up waiting. She dialed the number on file and listened to it ring into a dead machine. She dialed the emergency contact, a Larkin, and got a robotic voice announcing the number was disconnected. She tried Mrs. Callahan next door and let it ring 11 times into an empty Florida kitchen 1,000 miles away. Then she looked up from my chart at the principal, who had come quietly to stand in the doorway, and something passed between them that neither of them said out loud in front of me. They were mandated reporters. They reported. The ambulance left through the side entrance during fourth period, so the other kids wouldn't see, which turned out to be the very first professional courtesy of the rest of my life. Somewhere on the highway, a paramedic named Doug tucked a heated blanket around me, and I told him, very seriously, "This is documented, it's going in the report, and don't call my mom, it costs a fortune." He patted my shoulder and said, real gentle, "You let us worry about the bill, kiddo." The county hospital kept me 2 nights. IV antibiotics, fluids, an ear specialist who used the word ruptured the way a carpenter says rotted, matter of fact, already 3 steps ahead into the repair. Nurses came through in shifts, every one of them kind, and I was so unused to being on the receiving end of care that I kept trying to straighten my own tray table. On the second morning, a woman walked in without a clipboard leading the way, mid-30s, dark hair pulled into a bun that had mostly lost the fight, lanyard flipped backward. Renata Diaz, from Child Protective Services. She did something no adult had done for me in a long time. She pulled the chair in close and sat down low, so that I was the one looking down at her instead of up. She asked about the stack of dog books on my blanket. We talked about beagles for a full 10 minutes. Then, in the same easy voice, "When did your mom leave, Fiona?" I heard myself answer, smooth as a hymn, "She's at the store." Renata didn't blink. She didn't write anything down. She just waited, the way Ms. Ostrander had waited, the way people wait when they already know the answer and are simply giving you the dignity of saying it yourself. I looked at the ceiling tiles. Somewhere in that silence, 24 days of arithmetic finally came due all at once. October 3rd, I said. She left $20. Renata nodded slowly, the way you'd nod at something perfectly reasonable, and then she said the sentence that rearranged my whole interior. $20, 24 days. You did everything right. And none of it was ever your job. She asked if I had any other family anywhere. I gave her the only name I had left, a name I remembered from a funeral when I was 7, Grandma Opal. My dad's mom. Mom said she moved away. Opal Ellison had not moved away. She was 40 minutes north on County Road 6, on 11 acres with a flock of chickens and a part-time shift at the Harmon Post Office, exactly where she'd been my entire life. Renata found her within an afternoon. The background check took 2 days, which I spent at a receiving home with bunk beds and a woman who made pancakes shaped like lopsided hearts. Then a state sedan carried me up a gravel driveway toward a porch. Tall woman in a barn coat stood gripping the railing like it owed her money. In her kitchen, later that week, I learned the rest. Every birthday card she'd mailed me for 4 straight years, returned unopened, rubber banded together in an old cookie tin. But that part comes later, because first there's the part you've been waiting for. November 9th, day 40. An airport taxi pulled up outside the house on Larkspur Avenue, and my mother stepped out sunburned and glowing, duty-free bags rustling against her legs. Vince trailed behind her, wrestling the suitcases. Her sunglasses were still shoved up into her hair. Neighbors saw the whole thing. Cedarville has a long memory and even longer windows. She reached the porch and stopped. A county notice was taped across the door seam, official blue case number, a caseworker's card stapled to the corner, and a summons underneath it. Upstairs, my bedroom curtains hung open on a room she could see straight through, bed stripped, closet emptied by a caseworker's gloved hands. My mother dropped her duty-free bags on the porch boards and folded in half like the air had gone out of her all at once. And out it came, loud enough that Mrs. Peterson across the street heard it clean through her television. No, no, this can't be happening. 40 days, that's how long it took her to notice I was gone. The $20, for the record, was still in my mitten. $4.75 of it anyway. My first night on the farm, Opal made chicken and dumplings from scratch, and the whole house smelled like something I didn't have a name for yet. She didn't ask me a single question with a blade hidden in it. She only wanted to know if I liked butter on my bread, and whether I was a top bunk or bottom bunk kind of girl. Then she showed me to a room at the top of the stairs, where model airplanes still hung from the ceiling on fishing line, my father's old room, his old bed, a window looking straight out at the barn. After dinner, I did what I'd been built to do. Cleared the table, ran the water, had a plate half scrubbed before she'd even fully stood up. Opal came over and turned off the tap. She took the dish towel out of my hands the way you'd take scissors away from a sleepwalker, gentle and absolutely final. She looked at me down her long nose and said, "You can go rest. I'm not going anywhere." I didn't believe her. I want to be honest about that. I lay in my father's bed under a quilt heavy enough to be its own kind of company, wide awake for 2 hours, waiting for the catch, for the invoice love was about to hand me here, for the fine print. The house just creaked and stayed warm. Somewhere downstairs a clock ticked with nobody making it mean anything. In the morning there were eggs from actual chickens and a cookie tin on the table. Inside, rubber banded together, 4 years of birthday cards. To Fiona, age 8, to Fiona, age 9. Every envelope stamped return to sender in my mother's handwriting. I never missed a single one, Opal said, filling my plate. They just never let me reach you. I had spent years assuming nobody on my father's side wanted me. Somebody had wanted me the entire time. By certified mail. My mother called the farmhouse 9 days after she landed. Opal held out the receiver, one eyebrow lifted, hand cupped over the mouthpiece. "You don't have to, I took it anyway. Hope is a habit, same as any other." Her voice came through in its warmest register, the one she usually saved for loan officers. "Baby, this has all been blown so far out of proportion. You were fine, weren't you? You're always fine." A pause, sugar poured over steel. "When they ask, just tell them you were fine. You're my easy girl. Don't ruin this for us." There it was, the job posting for my old position. I stood in Opal's kitchen with the phone against my good ear, and for 1 second, 24 days of flashlight nights folded up small, and the old reflex reached automatically for the old script. "I'm fine. Everything's fine." Then I told her I had homework and hung up. Meanwhile in town, my mother worked on the audience that actually mattered to her. She showed up at First Baptist that Sunday in a gray dress with a collar like a pilgrim's, eyes lowered, voice soft. telling anyone within earshot about the sitter who'd canceled at the last minute, the messages that never reached her, the whole tragedy of a misunderstanding. And here's what still fascinates me. All these years later, some of them believed her. A woman that composed, that well-spoken, walking up with a casserole dish in her hands, surely doesn't abandon her own child. She simply has bad luck. That's the arithmetic the town knew how to do. Then, the week of Thanksgiving, the county prosecutor filed a charge of child endangerment, and my mother's attorney explained the new math to her plainly. A mother fighting hard to win her daughter back looks a great deal better to a sentencing judge than one who simply chore. Uggs it off. If you've ever watched somebody perform love for an audience, you already know this feeling. Tell me about it in the comments. And stay with me, the courtroom is coming. The dependency case opened that December, and life folded into a strange new rhythm, with a courtroom waiting at the far end of it. I enrolled at Harmon Elementary, where nobody knew my story, and a girl named Bree traded me half her sandwich for help with long division like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. Wednesdays were visitation days, 1 hour at the county office, in a room with soft chairs, a one-way window, and toys meant for kids half my age. My mother arrived at the very first visit 15 minutes early, a first in recorded family history, carrying a teddy bear the size of a toddler and a shopping bag from the mall with 3 sweaters in my size. She hugged me long enough for it to land in Renata's notes. She called me her whole world twice, at a volume calibrated exactly for the observation window. I sat there in the soft chair with that bear on my lap, watching my own mother the way I used to watch my spelling words, checking carefully for errors. The performance was good, I'll give her that much. The tears arrived precisely on cue and left just as cleanly, mascara untouched, every anecdote landing with her cast as the heartbroken heroine of a story where the villain was a telephone. If I hadn't lived through it myself, I might have believed her too. That's the part nobody warns you about with charming people. The charm is completely real. It's simply not for you, it's for the room. On the drive home, Opal asked how it had gone. I looked out at the frozen fields sliding past and said, she was really good. Opal's hands stayed steady on the wheel, she said, which from Opal was a full paragraph. The next visit, my mother stopped performing entirely, and somehow that was worse. Third visit, she came empty-handed, no bear, no bag, and for once, no audience voice. She sat across the little table and studied her own manicure like it belonged to somebody else. And then my mother told me a story I'd never once heard in 11 years of being her daughter. Her own mother, a grandmother I'd never met, had died of cancer when my mom was 12. Her father came home from the funeral, poured a drink, and never entirely stood back up. So the 12-year-old ran the house, cooked, cleaned, forged his signature on report cards, hid the bottles before school, woke him for work by pouring out half the whiskey so his hands wouldn't shake so badly. Nobody helped. Nobody made a single phone call. They didn't call it neglect back then, she said, looking straight at me for once, no glaze, no shine. They called me capable. I thought it made me strong, Fiona. I'd have bet my life on it. I thought I was giving you what it gave me. One tear escaped, an unrehearsed one, and she wiped it away fast like it embarrassed her. And here is my confession. I nearly went around that table. My hand actually moved because I could picture her, 12 years old, watering down whiskey in a cold kitchen, being called capable by people who should have been calling somebody for help. My mother had been me. Nobody had ever come for her, and she'd grown up believing that was simply what childhood was, a test you passed alone. Then the hour ended, and she straightened her collar, and the shine dropped back down over her eyes like a shop shutter closing. So you'll tell the judge this was all a misunderstanding, she said. Right, baby. And my hand came back to my own side of the table. In January, Opal and I sat down with Louise Faraday, the guardian ad litem, a retired schoolteacher with reading glasses, and a folder she squared against the table edge like she was calling a class to order. Her job was to figure out what was actually best for me, and she believed firmly in showing her work. So she walked us through everything the county had assembled, as plainly as a weather report. The power company's log, final disconnection notice mailed September 28th, 5 days before the taxi ever left. The school's log, 6 phone calls to the house, 2 letters, no response. Then came the page that changed the temperature of the entire room. The school district, it turned out, had gone further than anyone realized. They'd tracked down the hotel in Rome through the travel agency and sent a fax on day 18, unable to reach parent or guardian of student. Please contact school urgently. Delivery confirmed by the hotel's own front desk. Guest notified. And stapled behind it, the airline record. On day 20, 2 full days after that fax, my mother and Vince had changed their return tickets. Not toward home, away from it, 2 more weeks. Rome is magic. I sat very still in Louise Faraday's office, doing the one thing I have always been able to do under any circumstance, the math. Day 18, she knew. Day 20, she chose. The postcard. Hadn't been a moment of cluelessness in looping handwriting. It had been an answer. Some math you work out with a pencil. Some math simply does you. Opal reached over and set one weathered hand flat against my back, right between my shoulder blades, and left it there. No words. Just ballast, while a kind stranger in reading glasses squared her folder and quietly moved my mother from the column marked careless into the column marked chose. That distinction was about to matter more than anyone in that room could yet know. Vince resolved himself the way men like Vince always do. Somewhere between the criminal charge being filed and the holidays, he loaded the espresso machines and his gold watch into his truck and rediscovered a pressing business opportunity 2 states away. He left my mother the mortgage, the legal bills, and the consequences, the only 3 things he ever actually let her keep. With him gone, her legal strategy sharpened into something almost elegant. Her attorney's line, repeated to anyone holding a gavel or a notepad, Diane is a devoted mother, victim of an unreliable spouse and a tragic breakdown in communication, fighting tirelessly for reunification with her daughter. I learned the word optics that winter, standing outside a cracked office door I should have simply walked past. Renata was in Opal's kitchen, coffee gone cold, voice low. I've been doing this 11 years, she was saying. The custody fight isn't really about Fiona. It's about sentencing. If the family court believes she's mother of the year, the criminal court goes easier on her. Opal murmured something I didn't catch. And Renata answered, then we make sure the judge hears the child, not the strategy. I stood in the hallway with my back against the wallpaper, doing my own quiet arithmetic. I had spent my entire life being useful to my mother, coffee, bills, silence. Now, at the very end of it all, I was useful in one final way, as evidence in her sentencing memo. You'd think that discovery would have made me angry, and eventually it did. But standing in that hallway at 11 years old, what I actually felt was something closer to relief. The relief of a puzzle finally showing you its picture. The disposition hearing was set for the last week of February. Whatever I said in that room, or didn't say, was going to decide where the rest of my life happened. At the second-to-last visit before the hearing, my mother played her final card, and it was an ace. The hour was ending, and Renata had stepped out to sign us both through at the front desk, which left the 2 of us alone in a beige hallway for the first time since the taxi. My mother knelt down, actually knelt, eye level with me, and I realized, with a small electric shock, that I couldn't remember her ever having done that before. Listen to me, baby, she said, and her voice was the true one, the rare one, the one from before Vince, maybe even from before my father died. Choose me at the hearing. Tell them you want to come home and all of this goes away. We'll sell the house, just you and me. Somewhere nobody knows us. A fresh start. Her thumb brushed my cheek. Someday I'll show you the tower for real. You're my girl, Fiona, mine. I need you to understand what she had just done, because it took me years to see the full size of it. She had reached into me with surgical precision and pulled out the exact dream I had been praying toward for 11 straight years. Her and me, no audience. A mother with room left over for the easiest kid in the world. Word for word, the dream. And the worst part wasn't that I didn't believe her. The worst part was that some piece of me still wanted to. Wanting doesn't die just because you've been handed evidence. I had a mitten full of evidence, and my chest still pulled toward her like water finding a drain. Renata's shoes squeaked at the far end of the hallway. My mother rose smoothly, smoothed my collar flat, and was fully back in costume by the time the door opened. 4 days until the hearing. Opal never once told me what to say. I want that on the record because the court wondered and the lawyer even asked. Not once. What she did instead, 2 nights before the hearing, was sit with me at the foot of my father's bed, under those slowly turning model airplanes, and tell me one story. My father, Daniel, at exactly my age, had once borrowed his own father's good fishing rod without asking and snapped the tip clean off. Terrified of the whipping he was sure was coming, he hid inside the chicken coop and refused to come out, wouldn't answer, wouldn't budge. Opal found him by the toes of his sneakers under the roost door, and instead of hollering him out of there, she carried a kitchen chair outside, set it by the coop door and sat all night. Didn't call in. Didn't threaten. Didn't leave. Just sat where he could see her shadow under the door, so he'd know the one thing that actually mattered, that whenever he decided to come out, somebody would still be waiting. He came out at dawn. Nobody whipped anybody. The rod got mended with a brass sleeve and it hangs in the barn to this day. She showed me. Then Opal looked up at those slow-turning airplanes and gave me the closest thing to a closing argument she ever offered. Whatever you say on Thursday, this door doesn't close. You come out whenever you're ready. I'll be sitting right here. I slept that night better than I had since October. And in the morning, I asked her for something, asked out loud for a thing I actually needed, which sounds small unless you've spent a year being the kid who never asks for anything. At the hearing, I told her, "Will you sit where I can see you?" The day before the hearing, Louise Faraday drove out to the farm to walk me through what to expect. "No witness stand," she explained. "You're 11, not on trial. Judge Perkins prefers talking with children in his chambers, just him, me, and you, at a low table." Then she squared her folder and said, "You don't have to choose anyone or anything. You can say nothing at all. But if you do want to speak, Fiona, the court will listen. He really will." After she left, I did the thing I always do. I prepared. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror the way I used to stand there with the flashlight, and I practiced saying true things out loud. And I learned something nobody warns you about beforehand. The truth has a cost, even when it's the correct answer. Every time I got halfway through it, my throat closed, because here is what the truth actually meant, all the way down. If I told that judge what October had really been, I wasn't only describing my mother. I was ending something for her. The charges, the town, the sentencing, my sentences were about to become her sentence. Somewhere out there, some other girl got to be 11 and worry about spelling tests. I stood in a farmhouse bathroom rehearsing the removal of my own mother from my life. The mirror didn't blink. Neither did I, and don't you dare call that easy. Before bed, I took something out of the cookie tin, where I'd started keeping the things that mattered most, folded it into the chest pocket of my good dress, and buttoned the flap flat. Opal never asked what it was. She just checked the button, the way grandmothers do, and turned off the light. The juvenile courtroom of Marion County was smaller than my classroom back home, dark wood paneling, an Indiana flag drooping beside a radiator that clanked like someone clearing their throat, a wall clock loud enough to hear between sentences. No jury box, no gallery of strangers, just 2 tables, a bench, and the small handful of adults my entire life had come down to. Judge Perkins, 58, with a face like a man at an auction giving absolutely nothing away. Louise Faraday with her folder squared. Renata in her good blazer. My mother at one table in the gray pilgrim dress, hair pinned into a low, humble knot her stylist had absolutely charged extra for. Her attorney beside her, cufflinks catching the light. And at the very back of the room, exactly where every sightline in the room could find her, Opal Ellison, in her church cardigan, sitting exactly where she'd promised she'd sit. The attorney went first, and he was good, the way expensive things are usually good. Devoted mother, a perfect storm of miscommunication, an unreliable husband since departed. A child who, he actually said this out loud, thrived independently, a testament to the values her mother had instilled. I watched my mother while he painted us both. She held the pose the entire time, hands folded, chin soft, a portrait titled Motherhood Wronged. She'd rehearsed too. It takes one to know one. I'd rehearsed in a bathroom mirror. She'd rehearsed in one of her own, and only one of us was about to be asked for the truth. Judge Perkins let the attorney finish every last brushstroke. Then he set down his glasses, looked at Louise Faraday, and said the sentence I'd been counting toward for 4 straight months. I'd like to hear from Fiona now. His chambers turned out to be a plain office with law books and a low round table, and Judge Perkins did something I will remember for the rest of my life. He took off the black robe and hung it on a hook before he sat down. "Makes me look like a bat," he said, and half smiled. "This is just a conversation, Fiona." Louise sat at my left with her folder closed. He asked about my new school, about the chickens, about whether Opal's cooking was any good. Then he folded his hands and asked, as plainly as a neighbor leaning over a fence, "Is there anything you want me to know?" I unbuttoned my chest pocket and set what was inside on his low table. $4.75. 4 bills gone soft as cloth, 3 quarters laid out in a neat row. "My mom left me $20 and 5 casseroles for a month," I said. I'd practiced keeping my voice steady, and it mostly held. I made it last 24 days. I watered the plants. I brought in the mail. I went to school every single day, and I didn't tell anybody because I was protecting our family. I did everything right. The radiator clanked twice down the hall, and I still woke up in an ambulance. Judge Perkins looked at the money. He didn't touch it. "My grandma Opal never gave me anything," I said. "Except she's there every single morning. Her house has heat and eggs, but that's not really why. She sat outside a chicken coop all night once for my dad, just so he'd know somebody was there when he finally came out. That's the whole thing, I think. That's what I've been trying to say since October." I looked at Louise's closed folder, at my $4.75, and then at the judge, and I handed him the only verdict I had. "My mom says she loves me, and I believe her. But loving me from Rome isn't the same as a home. I want to live somewhere someone stays." I asked, out loud in my own words on the record, to live with my grandmother, Opal Ellison. And I want to be exact about this, because it is the hinge of my entire life. Nobody handed me that ending. I chose it, and I paid for it, and both of those things belong to me. Back in the small courtroom, Judge Perkins put his robe back on and made it official in the flat, merciful language courts use for these things. Legal custody of the minor child granted to the paternal grandmother. Visitation for the mother contingent on completing a parenting program. Case reviewed in 1 year. Gavel, like a single knuckle against a door. And my mother, my beautiful, composed, twice-rehearsed mother, came up out of her chair as if the verdict had a temperature. "No, no, this can't be happening." Same words as the porch. Same exact pitch. It struck me, in the strange calm floating over that whole afternoon, that I had now heard my mother's honest voice exactly twice in my life, and both times it was grief over something being taken from her, and neither time was it me. Her attorney got a hand on her arm. "The hallway is where it finally finished, terrazzo floor, buzzing fluorescent light, 5 people within earshot, Renata, Louise, 2 clerks, and Opal." My mother crossed to me, her mask half-slipped, and tried the very last door she had. "After everything I gave you," she said, and then her voice dropped clean out of performance, all the way down to the flat, true register, and she handed me the sentence I have carried ever since. "You were easier to love from a distance." The clerks stopped pretending to read their clipboards. I looked up at my mother. I was 11, and my ear still whistled whenever the weather turned cold, and I did not raise my voice because somewhere over the past 4 months I had finally stopped auditioning. "I know, Mom," I said. "That's why I chose the person who stayed close." Then I took her hand, pressed the 4 soft bills and 3 quarters into it, and folded her fingers over the top, the way she used to fold mine over lunch money. "I kept your change," and then I walked to Opal. In the truck, I cried the entire 40 minutes home, not for the mother I was losing, but for the one I had finally stopped waiting for. The criminal case wrapped up a month later, quiet as a drawer sliding shut. My mother pleaded down to misdemeanor child endangerment. 2 years probation, mandatory parenting classes, community service at a food bank no novelist would ever dare invent. No jail time. The town split the way small towns always split. Some people crossed the street when they saw her coming. Some brought her casseroles and called the whole thing bad luck, because a woman that put together, that well-dressed, surely just had rotten timing. She finished probation without a single hitch. She had always been excellent at completing assignments in front of an audience. Vince resurfaced exactly once, years later, as a name in a small claims filing pinned to a bulletin board somewhere in Wisconsin, which felt about right. Spring came to the farm. One morning I found something new pinned to Opal's refrigerator, a magnet she must have taken from the Larkspur Avenue kitchen when she went to collect my things. The little rooster. Under it, the Harmon school bus schedule, my stop circled in red pen. So you always know when somebody's picking you up, Opal said, not looking up from her coffee. Same magnet. It used to guard $20. Now it guarded proof that somebody was coming. The years on that farm weren't a highlight reel. They were just life, which turned out to be better. Chickens named after old country singers. Homework at the big table while Opal snapped beans. Ms. Ostrander waving me over every time we drove past the library, a granola bar appearing at my elbow out of pure ceremony. My mother finished her program and used her visitation exactly 4 times that first year. Then twice the year after. Then Christmas cards that smelled faintly of the perfume counter, signed Mom, in handwriting I have forged more convincingly myself. I always wrote back short and polite, nothing that could be read aloud to an audience as proof of anything. She remarried in 2009 and moved out of state, and the distance she had always loved me from finally matched her mailing address. Stayed? I graduated from Harmon High with a nursing scholarship. Opal sat in the second row and didn't wave because waving was showy. She just sat where I could see her, which by then I understood was the entire language between us. She passed away when I was 26, in her sleep, in the house her son had grown up in 3 days after teaching me her dumpling recipe like she was completing a handoff. She kept her promise. She never went anywhere, right up until she absolutely had to. At her funeral, half of Harmon showed up, and I stood at the front and thought about a kitchen chair set outside a chicken coop all night for a scared kid who'd broken something he loved. I'm a pediatric ER nurse now, at a county hospital 40 minutes from just about everywhere, which is the only kind of distance I've ever fully trusted. Last winter we admitted a girl, 10 years old, pneumonia, clothes clean but put on in the wrong order. When the intake nurse asked where her mother was, the girl answered, bright as a bell, "She works a lot, I'm fine. I know that dialect. I'm fluent in it." So I pulled a stool up beside her bed, sat down below her eye level, and asked about the Beagle sticker on her folder. We talked about dogs for a solid 10 minutes. Then I stayed through the shift change, through the caseworker's arrival, through the exact moment her chin finally stopped performing. In my wallet, behind a plastic sleeve, there's a $20 bill. Not that 20, I gave that one back. This is the one Opal handed me my first week on the farm, just in case. The just in case never came, because her kitchen never once closed. I've carried this bill for more than 20 years now, and I have never broken it. And for the record, I'm still easy. Easy to find. There's a difference. If that October taught me anything, it's this. Family isn't the people who leave you $20 and a list. It's the ones who stay close enough that you never have to count what's left. That's my story. $20, 24 days, one librarian who noticed, and one grandmother who stayed. If somebody in your life ever made you feel easier to love from a distance, hear me on this, that was never about your worth. Check on the quiet kids around you, the ones performing fine. They're often the ones carrying the whole house on their backs. If this story stayed with you, send it to somebody who stays. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.